Next, we have my interview with Gabriella Gadenz. And we set up in a unique location. We're outdoors, set up a table out there in the fields, and we got to taste some spectacular wines that they make. Very interesting, 3 different wines, and he gave us a wonderful tour and explanation of them. Enjoy this interview. Gabriella, Marco, thank you very much for being here. We're in the fields. Where are we?
We are in Maremma, in the very heart of Maremma, close to the sea, about 20 kilometers far from the sea, and quite close to Grosseto and Scansano, in the middle between Grosseto and Scansano.
And is there something special about this area for making wine or for growing wine?
Yeah, I think so. It's very special because of the climate, of the soil. These soil are fantastic to grow vines. We are an organically grown vineyard, so we need perfect climate, perfect soil, so well fitting for our main grape, that is Sangiovese. And I think this is a very special area for Sangiovese.
What's your background? How did you get into winemaking?
Yeah, I'm agricultural science graduated in 2001. After graduation, I started working in Montalcino, in a big winery of Montalcino. I had several experiences in South America, in Chile, while working there in Montalcino. And in 2009, I started my freelance advising as winemaker, and I started working here also in 2009. So it's a long way here, and I could see the growing of these vineyards and the wines as well. So
since you kind of started in Montalcino,
yeah,
they also grow Sangiovese grape,
yeah.
And you're doing it here. What's the difference in the character? Because same grape, still in Tuscany, both places, but different regions. What's the difference of the character of the Sangiovese wine here versus the Sangiovese wine from Montalcino?
Montalcino, okay. Sangiovese is a very plastic grape to me. It's very interesting vinificating Sangiovese grapes because you can adapt this grape for every kind of wine. Rosé, first of all, really interesting rosé in this area, all over this area. Strong, long-aging Sangiovese like Montalcino, first of all, and Nobile di Montepulciano and Chianti Classico. And very easy, drinkable, soft, round, and so fruity wines like here in this area. So to me, the main character of Sangiovese here is the drinkability.
That they're more approachable, and when they're younger, they drink well.
It is. But a medium aging wine as well, because you can drink it also after 3-4 years, and you can feel it really interesting, different from the beginning, but really interesting. But the roundness of the tannins, maybe its first character, its main character.
Yes. How many bottles does La Mozza produce a year?
120, 130.
130,000.
Yeah.
And what's the distinction of the wines that you're making with La Mozza?
Okay, we have 2 varietali in Italiano, so 2 different wines focusing on just one grape. One is Sangiovese, I Perazzi Sangiovese. Perazzi is the name of the pear tree, wild tree, that is very common here. And we
That's this one?
Yeah,
So that's what this means. So Iperazzi, that's named after. So why did you name it after a pear tree?
Because it's very, very common here in this area, and it's wild. So when we arrived here, we found a lot of these trees, and we had to cut a lot of these trees to plant the vineyards. But some Perazzi is still there, and just to know that we are in a wild area, very wild area. So we have a Sangiovese, we have a Cabernet Sauvignon.
That's this one.
Yeah, the blue one.
And so you still have on all the labels is the pear, right?
Yeah, the same name, Iperazzi.
And is this 100% Cabernet?
100% Cabernet Sauvignon.
So now that's a different Bordeaux varietal, but you brought it into the Tuscan region. So what was your thinking or philosophy there?
This is a very interesting area for late harvest grapes. So Cab is a really late harvest grape, and we decided some years ago in 2014 to plant some hectares of Cabernet Sauvignon, thinking that it's fitting so well for this area. And yes, it's fitting so well.
And what's the other wine that you make?
The Arigoni, that is our main and first wine we produced.
What is Arigoni? Why that name?
Arigoni is a Spanish name coming from Aragon. Spanish were here in the 16th. They colonized this area. So this is a blend of just Mediterranean grapes. Sangiovese, of course, some Syrah, that is another southern French, really interesting grape for this area. Some Alicante, that's really autochthonous here. Spanish people bring Alicante in this area. Finally, some Carignano.
Yes.
It is another Mediterranean and really interesting late harvest grape.
So you get to. So is this fun for you to get to every year figure out a blend for all these grapes and how to create this wine?
Yeah. The goal is to find the balance between Sangiovese, that is the main part of this blend. Sangiovese usually have more tannins, so you have to find the balance between the tannins and the acidity of Sangiovese and the softness and the roundness of tannins of the other grapes. But it's a challenge. It's really interesting challenge, and I think that this area is very suitable to produce this kind of wine. Arigoni is a very long-lasting and long-aging wine.
Is it your most popular wine of the three?
Yeah, of course. The first we produced since the beginning.
Right. So, Marco, when you're explaining these wines to people, how do you try to have them understand what these wines represent?
This wine, first of all, they describe a region that, because of the climatic, so the very high heat and the proximity to the water, they deliver wines and grape that is very particular and very special. I describe, and this is one of my favorite winery because the wines are so easy to drink. They're very not complicated to understand, and they're so balanced that inside these wines you have all the components that you're looking for into a wine. So you can have a couple of glasses by itself, and then when you start eating, these wines almost react to the food. So you have acidity that can come out a little bit bigger with different kind of foods, or you have a tannic that sometimes they're hidden, and when they come out. So it's almost like a start to finish, all day, everyday wine.
Yeah. So with your concepts in winemaking, do you have a particular philosophy that you follow that you'd say this is kind of the foundation of my approach towards winemaking?
Yeah, I think that first of all, we have to manage the vineyard, and definitely we need ripe, mature grape to have great wines.
And this is an interesting question for us. I've been trying to sort out. How much involved is the winemaker in the farming? Because it sounds like you're saying you're directly involved.
Yeah, but here I'm working both in the vineyard and in the winery. So for me, it's the same job, the same kind of work.
But do you control? Are you the manager of the farming also?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. So basically, you're the person that's going to make the wine, but you're also in control of the farming of the grapes.
Yeah. Everywhere I'm working, somehow I'm trying to work in the same way, studying from the vineyard, to get really ripe and nice and safe grape.
Right.
Because if you have safe and ripe grape, you are so close to the goal, I think.
What was it that got you inspired to choose this career?
My father is a farmer, so I was born in the countryside close to Florence. I loved the wine since I was a child, so for me it was something really easy to get this choice. Yeah.
Is there a special way that if I take these wines home that I should enjoy them? Are things I can do at home? Do you decant these wines? Do you just pour them? Do you let it breathe for a period of time?
Yeah, I think you have to wait for Arigoni, definitely. And I suggest to drink Arigoni after oxygenating a little bit.
For how long do you think?
I think 40-45 minutes is enough. Because we try to get very high concentration in this wine. So sometimes you have to wait, and I think this is the delicious thing in drinking and approaching this kind of wine. Not about Sangiovese and Cab that are very approachable and immediate.
So what's the general rule on that? Because a lot of times I get conflicting information that you need to decant wines of certain age or certain varietals. You could just let them breathe in the glass. You don't need to decant. You got to wait 2 hours.
Yeah.
You only can wait 10 minutes.
Yeah.
So how do I know? And are there general rules as far as what wines I want to decant, what wines I don't, what wines need to breathe for hours, what wines don't?
Yeah, depending mainly on the concentration and polyphenolic compounds concentration.
So when you say concentration, you're talking about tannins or?
Yeah, tannins, color, structure in general. A very tannic wine, full body wine, usually you have to wait some time for drinking because oxygen has to open the aromas, the bouquet of the wine. So sometimes it's necessary to wait. You can drink immediately, but tasting it, you feel that is evolving, is changing second by second. So this is the sign you have to wait to feel this wine. In other case, you have soffritti feeling immediately after serving. So what happens with this Sangiovese of La Mozza and also the Cab, but especially with Sangiovese, that is really approachable and very highly fruity since the beginning. So in that case, you don't need to wait. You feel all what the wines can give you immediately.
So for people to understand tannins, the feeling in the mouth, so you put the wine in your mouth and it has almost like maybe called pucker effect. Like like if you had a tea bag in too long and it's steeped too long, you drink the tea and it kind of like makes you feel this.
It is.
So if you're drinking the wine and you're feeling that kind of puckering in your mouth, that's the tannins, and that needs more time to breathe until they can kind of open up a little bit.
Yeah, but I like this kind of sensation drinking, especially Sangiovese. But a good tannin quality must be structured, powerful, but not drying out.
Yes.
What we try to avoid is drying out sensations that are quite common in some area of Tuscany with Sangiovese and give you bad sensations.
Yes.
So we try waiting for the best maturation, first of all, and managing pumping over, punching down, all the skin contact and fermentation.
Yes.
Yeah.
There's this phrase that I keep hearing, a description of wines as super Tuscan.
Yeah.
So what does that mean? And are any of these wines, or is the Arigoni a super Tuscan wine?
Okay, Aragone to me is a super Mediterranean more than a super Tuscan.
Is there such a thing? Is that another term that's used, super Mediterranean?
Yeah,
or-
because we decided to use just Mediterranean grapes. And this is the main difference between our Aragone and other famous super Tuscan produced in the 90s that are commonly made with Cab, Cabernet Franc, Merlot, so French varieties.
Yes.
This is all from Mediterranean area. So from Sangiovese to Carignano, passing through Syrah and Alicante. Everything is from this area.
So
autochthon.
do some people try to call it a super Tuscan and you have to correct them?
No.
No?
No.
Okay. So you call it super Mediterranean. And
Yeah,
it's all
yeah,
those
it's-
grapes. But the same concept, saying that it's not a part of a DOCG type of a wine. It's you're more you're doing something out of the normal boundaries of the area to create something unique.
Exactly. We are in the Morellino di Scansano growing area, Maremma Toscana growing area, but with Aragone we are free. We feel free to give the power to the vineyard and try to get the best from the vineyard.
That's terrific. Well, I very much appreciate you taking the time. So Marco, thank you.
Yes, absolutely. Always
And
a
Gabriele,
pleasure.
Thank you very much
Thank
for
you to
doing
you.
this.
It was a pleasure.
It was great. Thank you very much. I really loved hearing Gabriele's story, the road that got him to doing the work he's doing today, and certainly has a lot of passion around his winemaking. So thanks for indulging in that particular interview with me. Let's talk about one of the great mysteries of wine. Decant or not to decant? That is the question.
That is the question.
So when do you usually recommend decanting a wine, or maybe even as importantly, not to decant a wine, and why do you do it?
So I think we need to go back to understanding why we will want to decant. You want to decant to allow a little bit of oxygen to touch the wine. So you start in the oxygenation process.
So-called breathing.
The breathing, the releasing. So I always say usually the better wines are more meant to be decanted. Generically speaking, it's always better to decant rather than not decant, because even if the wine has a little flaw or has still a little bit of CO2 or some gases, as you decant it will blow away. So for me, if you're unsure, always decant. The only question mark is with very old wines. Very old wines, I almost never decant, because
What would you consider very old?
very old is usually 25 years and older.
Okay.
They had already plenty of time and oxygenation through the cork. They don't need to really open up, and it's always a mystery if they are going to hold up or if they're going to.
So 25 years or older, typically, you don't want to decant that because the fruit will get weak probably in the wine,
Yes,
right? Yeah.
they probably get weak, and it's all about oxygen is a very strong component. It's a powerful component to the wine, and as the wine ages, it gets a little weaker. It gets a little, and so oxygen can be very aggressive to the wine.
Now I see here you have two different shaped decanters. Does the shape of the decanter matter, or is that just style?
The shape of the decanter is just style.
Yeah.
I think it's the only thing. The purpose of decanting is to expose as much surface of the wine to oxygen.
Right.
So you see a lot of tools out in the market like aerator or decanters. It's just another way to get some oxygen into the wine and let it open up. So the shape is purely a personal choice.
So can you decant?
Yes.
Show us how you do that.
Yes. I always like to go very slow. As I talked about, it's a natural product, so I do not want to shake it. I don't want to be too aggressive. And in the process of pouring the wine into decanter, I'm also happy in the wine to get more oxygen as possible. always look when you get to about halfway through the bottle, or also to the end, and look through the bottle and see if you see any residue, any sediment. If you see any of those, maybe you stop pouring with a little bit left in the bottle, so you don't let all the sediments in. And if there are no sediments, go ahead and pour the entire bottle. And once you're finished, you want to swirl it a little bit. You just want to give it a little bit of shake.
I can smell it from here.
And then the wine is ready for your glass.
Beautiful. Marco, do you also recommend decanting white wines?
Absolutely. Majority of the cases is better to decant, and more important to decant white wines, because sometimes they have volatile parts that needs to be released more than red wines. So I would definitely decant white wines.
Well, terrific. I think I'll be decanting a lot more of my wines now.
Yes,
That's great.
It's a good investment. You should have a decanter at your house. They're very easy. They can be any shape or form. They don't have to come. They don't have to be also decanter. Any even old bottle. Get creative.
Yeah.
I've seen some winemakers cut a bottle on the top and just use another bottle of wine as their decanter. So
well, and incidentally, form and function is something, because I know I've got varying decanters at home, and I know I have one that's shaped like this. Really difficult to pour that one. Yes. This one, a lot easier.
A lot easier. Exactly.
But that one maybe looks a little cooler.
Yeah.
Yeah. Coming up now is my interview with wine expert and wine journalist Stephen Brook. This man has written, I think, 18 books on wine. Some of them are very, very lengthy. So in the end, Stephen has an encyclopedic knowledge of wine, and he gets to share some of that with us right now. Enjoy this interview. Stephen, thank you very much for doing this with us.
Pleasure.
You are somebody that I get nervous around because of your depth of knowledge about wine. You've written 18 books, some of them very lengthy, not little pamphlets.
Yeah, one's 500,000 words long, but some of them are shorter.
I don't know if I've read 500,000 words my whole life, but you're a wine writer, so
That's what I do.
You bring to life through words the world of wine. What got you into that?
I got into wine writing by mistake, which is true of an awful lot of wine writers, because I was working for a magazine at the time, and they wanted something on food and wine. So I wrote an article about something I didn't know a great deal about, but it went down well. So that turned into a column for the magazine every 3 months. That turned into a monthly column. And hey presto, I was a wine writer. Because once you've got a column, you get invited to everything. You get invited on trips. And I was a quick study. So that's really how I got into it. But it wasn't the only thing that I was doing at the time.
Did you have much of a background in wine prior to doing this?
Consumption.
Consumption, yeah.
No, I was always aware of it from childhood, but my family were not regular wine drinkers. Yeah. And at university, there was very good wine around, but I couldn't afford to drink it.
Yeah.
It's not very often. Yeah. So I sort of self-taught.
And you're from the UK, which they don't really have, they have winemaking regions in the UK now?
Do now, let me tell you, yes. Millions of bottles of sparkling wine, very good quality. Same price as champagne.
Wow, okay. And then, moving forward, you started to really develop, I guess, a lot of copy on places like Bordeaux, I think you were saying, or Germany. So how do you choose the places that you want to dig into and start writing about?
Well, I happen to speak fairly fluent German and French. So those are the obvious places for me to go to.
Right.
Italy, I come to Italy perhaps 10 times a year, and I write a lot about Italy, but I've never written a book about Italy, because I don't think my Italian is rudimentary, and you need to interview people. You need to get to grips with what they're saying. You've got to read between the lines. You've got to pick out the lies and deceptions. So I can do that in French and German with relative ease. Italy, I couldn't do it. And there are too many other people who are real specialists in Italian wines. I didn't want to compete. So it's dictated by practical considerations. And California, I've written 3 books on California. It's because I used to go out there in my previous career as a publisher. And when I had nothing better to do in San Francisco, I'd go up to Napa Valley. Yeah. In those days, there were only like 30 wineries. So you could visit them all in a weekend.
Wow.
Well, not quite, but it isn't like it was today. And I just love the wines, I love the climate, I love the people. So I really sort of fell in love with Napa and Sonoma at that time and kept it up.
To me, so much about wine is the story, right? That's so much of what you're experiencing. And you're career seems to be about bringing that story to life, because you didn't talk about going and just tasting wines and writing about wines. You're talking about interviewing people, getting information. So for your mind, how does that play into the experience of wine?
For me, it's central. It's the culture of wine is what it really interests me in the broadest sense.
Yeah.
And I have limited interest in lining up 60 glasses of Sancerre and working my way through them and giving them scores. Sometimes I do it because of the nature of my work, but it's not what I particularly enjoy. I can see it's useful for consumers, but I like to put wines into a broader context.
Yeah.
So whether it's ecclesiastical origins, which would be in Burgundy, or varietal selections, why certain grapes are planted where they are, not in other places, how political factors such as the communist era in this part of the world affected wine styles, like Hungary, Tokaj, miserable stuff during the communist years. Right. Now again, a great wine restored.
So we talk about that for a moment? Because
sure.
we are in Slovenia, and they've gone through all these border changes and all the political changes. This used to be Yugoslavia. And you just said something interesting that I hadn't heard somebody else say before, that the wine, as far as the quality of the wines under communist rule, were not good. What do you attribute that to?
Collectivization. People who owned vineyards essentially had half a hectare, an acre, just for their family use. There was no wine industry as such in Eastern Europe. And what there was at a very low level. So in Tokaj, in Hungary, which has been making great, great sweet wine since the 17th century, most of it went to Russia. And it was miserable quality, and they added alcohol to fortify it, which would be unheard of in authentic Tokaj or Tokaj as it's made today. So the overall quality was very low, and there were certain casks they kept for the journalists. So if I would turn up, we're talking about the late 80s, we're talking about a long time ago, 30 years ago, those would be the authentic wines. And so I'd scribble down what I thought about them, but very few of those wines actually were marketed.
And now, is it wrong or not the right objective approach? Because when I go and I visit an actual vineyard or I meet a winemaker, and then have that wine subsequent to that, it seems to be a deeper experience for me than when I've had it before I ever had been to there. And I'm wondering, I say, geez, but shouldn't I be more objective in my palate as far as what I'm tasting? But somehow I am always affected by how I emotionally experience the wine because now I've been there.
Absolutely, I agree with that 100%. I mean, I haven't written about Slovenian wines because although I've tasted them for the past 20 years, I haven't been here.
Right.
Now I begin to understand the wines better. I've been to Collio next door. It's not that different. And I've written about Collio. But until you've sort of walked the vineyards, sort of sniffed the air, put the soil through your fingers, and that way you get to understand what it's all about. And as I say, again, it's putting it into a historical and cultural context, which you can't do unless you go there.
Right.
Which is why there are many parts of the world where I wouldn't dream of writing a book about them because haven't set foot in them or not sufficiently to justify it.
And at the same time, if somebody who's watching this might say, well, geez, I can't travel all these places to try to do this, but this is why you write books and you write articles, because you're actually doing this and then transposing it into the written word, and people can still have the experience almost through your writing.
Yeah, and to give some idea about the style of the wines as well, what they're like, so people can read about a particular wine that I'm writing about and say, it's not my cup of tea, if you might mix metaphor. So that's part of what I'm doing. I mean, educational sounds pompous, but let's say informing people.
Yes.
Because you're right. I mean, yes, there are people that do travel in the world looking at vineyards and buying up wines from particular regions or growers, but they're still in the minority. I mean, most people just going into a restaurant and ordering a bottle that the price is right and it's recommended or whatever. But if I can give them information that helps them make that choice, rather as a sommelier does, that's part of my role.
Has this been like a dream career for you to say, hey, I get to go visit these places, meet these people, taste these wines?
Yes, but I used to be a travel writer as well.
Yes, you were already doing that, yeah.
No, I mean, it's a great way of life, but you have to accept a certain instability.
Yeah.
You don't know where your next paycheck is coming from necessarily. And I can write a very long book, but if only 1,500 people buy it, I probably am out of pocket because of all the travel expenses and so on.
Right.
So I don't write books in order to make money, but at the same time, I do have to live.
Yes.
So it's not the most well-paid of professions, but it's certainly one of the more enjoyable ones.
Yeah.
Beats going to the office.
I was going to say, yeah, you're not showing up at the office.
I
every
used to go
day.
to the office. You go to the water cooler for half an hour and you get paid for it. It doesn't happen in my line of work.
Yeah, well, but indeed, you are certainly creating a lot of value in being able to take people on these journeys, by being sort of their ambassador that can go and do the tasting.
I hope so. I hope so. I mean, I'm writing really for a fairly niche market.
Yeah.
I mean, there aren't that many people out there. My latest book is on Austrian wines.
Mm-hmm.
There's a good market for Austrian wines. They're very high quality. A number of people actually want to buy a book, take it with them, and go and visit particular vineyards. It's fairly small. We're talking about a couple of thousand.
Wow.
So.
And when you now go to a restaurant and you sit and you have the wine list put in front of you, do you normally just sit and select, or do you have a conversation with the sommelier? Kind of.
The only conversations I have with sommeliers is trying to catch them out.
What do you mean by that?
Well, I say, what do you think will go better with this dish, or this wine is a bit more expensive. What would you recommend? And I throw them sometimes rather pointed questions to see whether they know their stuff. Because there are a lot of fabulous sommeliers out there. You've just spoken to one, former sommelier.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of very pretentious, ill-informed ones out there as well.
Yeah.
So they're not my favorite breed. And when I choose my own wines, basically.
Yeah.
But if I know the sommelier or know of the sommelier, I'm only too happy to have a conversation with them.
Now,
Frequently do.
so somebody who doesn't have a lot of wine experience, but they want to enter the world and start a journey, through their life of learning more about it. What books do you think are the good foundational books just to start to get context? Or maybe what podcasts, or what would you recommend?
Well, I think among the best wine writers are the Brits, not just because I'm one of them, but I'm thinking of people like Jancis Robinson and Hugh Johnson. I mean, they know their stuff, they write eloquently, they have a fresh point of view. You could do a lot worse than start with people like them. Avoid the ratings-obsessed writers.
Yeah.
Because that's not the most interesting thing about a wine, whether it's 83 points or 86 points. Not that those scores exist any longer, everything is 95. But look for people with a broader knowledge and not just an experience of wine on the tasting bench.
That's a very interesting thing too, because you're right. I think the person, and I think even myself, I fall victim to this, is that I'm going through the wine store and I'm looking at varying wines, and they're always posting little ratings by many of the wines, etc. And it's a number, so it gives you some kind of a context. But I think I fall prey to saying, oh, well, this has got a good rating, then I should be more interested. And if it doesn't have a good rating, I should be less interested. But there's probably some things that maybe some wine critic like so much that might be really appealing to me.
Yeah, the trouble is that wine critics are now all in competition with each other, and they tend to overscore. So I wrote a piece for a magazine, an online magazine, in which I rated the 2014 vintage in Bordeaux, futures vintage. Hadn't come onto the market yet. And I scored all the wines, about 80 of them, but I hadn't tasted them because it was too early to taste.
Right.
And then 6 months later, I compared my scores with the scores from all the gurus and pundits. And I was within a cat's whisker of, not in every case, but in 75% of the cases. People now score brands, they don't score wines. So those sort of shelf talkers or shelf markers, whatever they're called, which used to be quite useful.
Yes.
Because even people like Robert Parker, who many people criticize, but he used to score a lot of wines in 83, 85, and it didn't mean that they were terrible.
Right.
It might mean they were a bit light or whatever. So 90 from him was a good score. 90 is now a base score.
Right.
90 is just about drinkable. If you really think it's any good, it's going to be 95 plus. So it's all become a bit of a nonsense. And I think I helped expose that. And wine is more than a number. It's a pleasurable experience.
Yeah. What a great idea, though, to say that you kind of did this almost to spoof them and to show that this is kind of you're basically exposing a whole area.
Yeah, it annoyed a lot of people, of course, but I'm getting to an age where I don't care anymore.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't think you made some friends there. And so, but I would expect just logically that in order for a wine critic to get better esteem, he'd be tougher on scores. You're saying that actually they're competing with each other to drive scores up. Why would that be?
Well, we're getting into slightly contentious specialist territory here. Look, there are quite a few wine critics who are now involved in wine events. And some of the big names are not going to turn up if he gives them low scores. So there's a certain conflict of interest there. I think that's the main reason. Yeah, they want to curry favor with the producers, but they want to be welcome in the wine regions, welcome in their cellars. I don't mean to be too disparaging. But it didn't used to be like that.
No.
And now it is.
I mean, I've spoken to, off the record, to many Napa wine producers, and they say that, they're very blunt about the fact that they were building their wines for Robert Parker's palate, because they know that if they got a good score, it's going to sell a lot more wine, they'll get a better price for it, et cetera. And that does sort of destroy the whole, fabric of what wine is supposed to be.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a lot less true today than it was, say, 15 years ago.
Yeah.
But I still think there's an American palate and there's a European palate. I think they are different.
Yes.
It's not for me to say that one is better than the other. For me, I find some of the American favored wines a little overripe, a little too unctuous, and at the end of the day, a little bit boring, because they don't have enough bite and assertiveness. But that's just that's a personal matter.
That's actually another interesting topic. So a European palate, more complex, more subtle, how would you describe it?
Yeah, perhaps more subtle. After all, most wines in Europe, maybe not southern Italy or Spain, are produced in marginal climates. They're sort of on the edge, which means that there's some years where you don't get full ripeness.
Right.
And if it's really sort of green and nasty, it's a bad wine, no question about it.
Right.
But sometimes if there's that slight herbaceous character, we'll tolerate it. We'll even like it because it gives a certain cut to the wine, a moorish quality to it. American palates tend not to tolerate that.
Yeah.
They find it unpleasant, and they'd rather have their wines overripe than underripe. And okay, fair enough. I mean, that's their choice, but it helps define why a lot of American wines, South American as well as North American, are made in a certain way.
Yeah. Do you feel that the wine industry is changing quite a bit now as far as how they're producing and what they're producing, or do you think it's on a steady track?
I think it's getting better all the time.
Yeah.
Oh, no question about it. I was going to Burgundy 30-something years ago, visiting top producers, and often they'd never been in their neighbor's cellar, and vice versa.
Right.
Everybody kept to themselves, did their own thing. Now it's a whole different generation. Young people, men, women, they've studied well at universities, then they've traveled to wherever it is, New Zealand or Argentina or Hungary, and then they've come back home and brought new ideas and so on. And they talk to each other, and they have tasting groups, and there's no question about it. And the technical knowledge is, I mean, nobody makes bad, or hardly anybody makes bad wines anymore. 30 years ago, there were an awful lot of bad wines.
Yeah, what's interesting is that even being here in Brda, I'm seeing that these winemakers who seemingly would be competitors with each other are all together. They're sharing, they're cooperating, etc.
Well, that's a relatively new thing and entirely welcome, because nobody's heard of Brda, let's face it. But if they can work together, given the quality of the wines in the first place, they can make a lot of waves, and that's it's in their interest to work together. There are regions, I know in France, where they have the syndicat, which is the local organization that promotes their wines. There was one region, Châteauneuf-du-Pape, very well known. 20 years ago, they had 3 competing organizations. So talk about not working together, they're all fighting each other.
Right.
So, I mean, that's a thing of the past. There's still a little bit of that in certain parts of the world, but now the tendency is to work together, to market together, to travel together.
Yeah.
So, and that's entirely positive.
Kind of the idea of co-opetition as compared to competition.
Yeah, yes.
Work together, but everybody try to do their best.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so any, for people that, again, are trying to deepen their knowledge of wine, any final thoughts or advice that you might have for them?
Be adventurous. I mean, I've been a little unkind about sommeliers, but if you go to a restaurant and you see a wine list that's got wines from all over the world, especially if they're from countries where the wines are relatively low price compared to whatever it is, Bordeaux or Napa, ask for recommendations, suggestions. Do the same thing at wine merchants. If you're lucky enough to have an independent wine merchant near where you live, which is certainly the case in Europe, it happens in the States too, go in there, get to know the guys behind the counter, they're happy to come out and chat and see what kinds of wines you like and recommend some things. It may not score every time in terms of hitting your palate, but share ideas, ask questions, be open-minded.
Yeah.
I mean, 40 years ago we had no choice. We had Bordeaux, we had Burgundy, we had Sherry, we had Port, maybe we had Chianti, if then. Now the whole world is open and full of wine and full of good wine. So get out there and find out about it.
Any particular just wine regions that you feel like are producing great values right now for what the wine is?
I still think Argentina makes fantastic wines at a fair price. So does South Africa, but less consistent.
Mm-hmm.
There are great wines now coming out of this area, Croatia, but the good wines are not cheap any longer. In fact, never have been, because they're produced in limited quantities and they are of high quality. There's still parts of Italy, Abruzzo, which is sort of east of Rome, along the coast, Adriatic coast, or Sicily. Mm-hmm. Campania makes fabulous wines, not that expensive, except at the very top level. Mm-hmm. No, there's plenty of bargains to be had out there.
That's
really
great.
Good wines that over-deliver.
Good for us.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, long may it continue.
Well, Stephen, thanks again so much for sharing your time and expertise with us. Very informative.
Great pleasure. Thank you.
Well, I don't know about you, but I would much rather listen to a shorter interview than read a 500,000-page book. But maybe some people can learn more from books. I like video interviews myself, so I hope you enjoyed that interview with Stephen Brook, and thanks for sharing that time with me. Marco, wine stemware is like a whole industry in and of itself. And very often you walk into restaurants, they have the whole setting there with different glasses for different purposes. Really the first question is, what's the proper way to hold a wine glass?
You should hold it as low as possible on the stem. Mm-hmm. That is for a couple of different reasons. One is you do not want to transfer your body temperature to the wine. Uh-huh. You do not want to...
So holding it down here.
Yes,
okay.
You do not want to leave any marks on the glass. Mm-hmm. So as low as possible on the stem. Like yes, you're using one finger to hold it on the bottom and use the stem as your main hold.
Now I see many different shaped and sized glasses here. How important is the wine glass to the experience of the wine?
That is very, very important. The shapes of the glass is a vehicle that can direct smells, they can direct fumes, they can direct perfumes of the wine and give you a whole different experience. We can go from white wines that, generically speaking, they are a little bit more closed on the top mm-hmm. because they want to funnel all the smells toward your nose mm-hmm. To champagne or Franciacorta glasses that they are as open as possible, like this one, because you want all the aromas, you want more surface on the wine to be able to...
So you'd put a sparkling wine in a glass like that?
Absolutely.
Now what about flutes? Because I hear people talk about champagne flutes.
Flute is only good for fruit juice. Never use a flute for wine.
Really? Okay.
Flutes are so detrimental to a wine because they are locking in, they're almost like caging in the wine, mm-hmm. and the wine has no way to open up, to be exposed to oxygen, and no way to release aromas. So
you're going with this for any sparkling wine, you're going with this?
Yes. Anything of a certain caliber wine, but mm-hmm. always the more surface for sparkling wine, the better, because you're going to be able to smell all those aromas.
So if you were to give us a quick tour of the wine glasses here, the shapes and what they're for, I guess I'll get rid of this one, right?
Yeah, we can get rid of the flute. But here we have two white wine glasses. Mm-hmm. They are both very wide on the bottom, mm-hmm. and they are shaped as a cone to really maximize and channel all those white wine flavors toward your nose. Mm-hmm. Red wine glasses usually are even from the bottom to the top. So you have wide on the bottom to expose the surface, but also a big opening. And then depending on the wine, this one is a Burgundy glass. Burgundy defined as Pinot Noir, Barolo, Nebbiolo, Sangiovese, where the grape is less fruit forward, so it needs a much bigger opening to really release all the aromas. Or you have a Bordeaux glass where the wine is already powerful enough that does not need any help, and so you just need a
nice bowl
a larger glass to drink off.
And so you said this was a red wine glass also.
Yes.
So, and now I know there's different varietals and different shapes for the varietals. What would you use that glass for?
This one is a generic red wine glass. It's a multi-service. A lot of grapes can be enjoyed in this. One thing that sometimes we don't pay attention is the thickness of the glass too.
Right.
So the better glass usually has a much thinner glass and thickness, and that also really makes a lot of the difference.
It makes a difference in the experience of it.
Yes.
Yeah, I had someone once give me the same wine in 2 different glasses, and it definitely changed the
Yes.
experience of the wine. So now let's talk about pouring, because sometimes I see people they'll fill a glass up to here. What's the proper way to pour a glass if you can use this wine right here?
Yes. So you always want to pour 3 to 4 ounces, so just the bottom part of the glass. You want to leave, we're talking about proportions, and you want to leave enough oxygen, enough space in the glass for the wine to aerate and touch oxygen. The more you fill it, the more wine you put, and the less oxygen there is. So it's always better to pour a little bit less and pour a few times, but this way you're securing that more oxygen goes into the glass.
Now, if I were at your restaurant, you just poured this for me, that would be past the tasting part of it, but I'd want to pick the glass up from down here.
Yes.
And then I'm going to, we'll do this together, I guess. Why
Yes,
not, right?
let's do it together. You want to go as low as possible or on the very bottom part of the stem.
Good.
If you're skillful enough, you want to just
around.
gently rotate. Rotating and swirling the wine, it's only going to awaken some of the aromas.
Right.
And right after you do that, you would like to put your nose in it and just breathe in this beautiful smell. This wine in particular has...
How would you describe it? Yeah, describe it, because this is very distinctive, this one.
This wine has a lot of bark, has a lot of tobacco, has a little bit of the chocolate. You can tell that it's an aged wine because it's, the acidity or everything that I get out of this wine reminds me of a beautiful aged smells.
What varietals are in here?
This is a little bit of Sangiovese, Syrah, and Alicante. This wine comes from Tuscany, and it's come from a beautiful area called Maremma.
Place you're bringing us.
Yes, I think we will go visit this area. One thing also that scares a lot of people is the swirling, because you might be afraid to
Swirl
spill
it
it.
out, yeah.
That's why you need to keep the wine low, so not with a full glass.
Right.
And you can start very, very gentle. A lot of times it's okay to use the table and use the surface of the table to
Right.
help you and stabilize the wine in order to swirl it.
Yep.
And then you enjoy these smells. And at a home or with customers, I always recommend to try that, and then try also the opposite. Try to leave the wine glass there for a few minutes, and as the wine settles, then you go smell it again, and sometimes it doesn't smell as much. And then you awaken the wine, and all these aromas are coming out.
Right,
So it's a bottle wine should be enjoyed in many different ways and throughout the whole bottle, and this is one of the way to be able to awaken these flavors.
Now, when you bring it in the mouth, are you usually taking a little bit of air in with it too, so you can get more of the flavor?
I take a little bit of air. It's the same thing as we do in the glass. We do it in the mouth.
Right.
You want to expose a little bit, awaken it. So as the wine opens up in your mouth, you're able to get more of the flavors and identify the wine very well. Yeah, you keep it in your mouth for just a second, and then you swallow it and you pay attention at what it does.
And that lasting part is called the finish, and you want to see how a longer finish is usually a better thing.
Usually, it's a better thing. It's synonymous of an important wine. Fresh wines. It's the same example in food. When you eat a blackberry, you eat it and then it disappears. But if you eat a piece of chocolate, it stays with you for a longer. Same thing in wine. If it stays with you and if it is longer in the mouth, down in your throat, it's usually synonymous of a more important wine.
Well, this was a nice one to pick for this test.
Oh yeah, I love this wine as a.
So then it would be important at home to have at least a variety of glasses for the different wines that you might drink with dinner.
It is, and I think we don't have to be scared about wine. Wine is natural. Wine should be very approachable. So even though you don't have a set of Riedel or a very expensive glasses, try with the containers that you have.
Right.
Try with a glass of wine. Try with a coffee mug. Try with a shot glass. Try with a whiskey glass. Put yourself through a test of a few different ones, and you'll discover by yourself what the glass and the container does for the wine, and then you'll become your own expert. There is no right or wrong in wine. We are our best judges. There is not one wine that is better than another one because we dictate that. There are preferences and there are facts about wine, but as far as drinking wine, we are all right.
This next interview is with Matej Cetric, who is a Slovenian, and what's unique about him is that he's a first-generation winemaker. He has a very interesting story as far as what led him to the winemaking business, and I love seeing someone who said, hey, I didn't get this from my parents or from my grandparents or my great-grandparents. We're the first to start this in our family. Check this one out. Matej, you are the first person I spoke to since I've been here in Brda, Slovenia, who is the first generation winemaker. What made you decide to get into this business?
Wine is my passion. It was my passion since before I drank the wine. But generally the wine, and especially the land, was in our family in the past, since my grandfather was a part of the biggest family in the village, and in his honor I made the name Ferdinand to our wines.
Yeah. So now your grandfather was Ferdinand?
Yes.
And but he was killed in World War II.
Yes.
But he left this land to the family?
No, generally it was like this. He was born under Austria, and he fought the war under Italy, and he went to the Yugoslav army later, and he died by Germans. So all the land which should be inherited by him went out of the family later. So my parents didn't live about wine, but they also wanted to live about wine, because also my father's wish was to make wine. But he didn't have the occasion, and in the last year, on the beginning of the 90s, we got the occasion to buy and to rent the land he had, and so we decided to do that and started by zero.
So you were able to get the land back that he had. It was the family land.
Yes.
Ah, that's exciting. And what did your father say to you when you told him, I'm going to go into the wine business?
Yeah, it was a common decision of both of us, because we won't decide it one without the other. So.
Yeah. And now it's interesting in this region, because the region has been, the borders have been changed so many times here. And you went to school with someone who has Slovenian background but lives on the Italian side, yes?
Yes, generally after my education in Ljubljana, I was lacking some knowledge on economics and marketing. That's why I decided to go to the wine MBA school in Trieste. And I met my friend and partner now there, and we both decided there to make a cross-border wine together. So generally we make wine by our grapes and by his grapes, and we blend the two wines together later.
And this is significant because you are taking, it's because there's two countries but one wine region. So you're basically making a statement saying we're going to take grapes from the two countries but put them into one wine because it represents this region as one.
Yes, historically this was always one region, and just the politicians decided how to make the border. They divided countries, vineyards, villages, families also, and our wish was to reunite together into the wine. That's why we called our wine Sine Finis, which in Latin means without end, without border. So
now, the president of Slovenia got together with the president of Italy,
Yes.
and my understanding is that they had your wine as a tribute when they met each other?
yes, in the how can I say, in an official visit of Slovenian president in Rome, of ex-president Danilo Turk to Giorgio Napolitano. They drank our wines as a symbol of collaboration between two countries. So it's also our wish to combine, to unite the countries, to unite Colli and Brda, and we're trying to do this through our wine.
And what's interesting, when you take wine from Brda, which is the Slovenian side, and Colli, which is the Italian side, but it's one region, you don't have a designation at that point. So how do you have to label it differently?
Practically, we will blend the two DOC wines. Just once we blend the two wines, we lose the appellation.
Right.
And now we practically sell the European wine, and the quality level is a table wine.
Yeah, it has to be called table wine because
Yeah.
Wow. And how are other people feeling about the fact that you're blending wines from these two places? Are they excited about it? Other people have the same spirit that you have about this?
It depends.
Yeah.
It depends. Many people are quite happy and see it with an interesting story, especially journalists who come, or people from abroad, or people who know the historical facts of the region. Some don't care, so it's like every business.
Yeah, I guess so. And you also don't spray your grapes. You keep things very natural.
Yes, as much as possible. We were for almost 10 years biodynamic, and we are working in that direction all the time.
Yeah. And so your overall winemaking philosophy, what's your approach?
We try to make as much as naturally, but in the wine we have 3 different styles. For example, we make the classic wines with the stainless steel. We make the barrel age with a longer aging process and with a more aging potential. And we also make 2 very, very natural wines with any kind of enologic intervent.
And you make red and white wines. So you have which grapes are you using in your wines?
Our most important grape is obviously Rebula, and we make Rebula in 4 different styles. I make the sparkling with my colleague and partner from Colli, Robert Princic from Winery Gradišćuta, and I make the classic line on Rebula. I made the barrel aged, and we call it Epoca. And also the wine, the Rebula with extended skin contact, which we call Brutus.
Brutus?
It's
They're
quite
strong.
very strong tannic, and it's not for everybody.
Not for everybody,
Yeah.
but people who like strong wines, then
Yeah.
they love that. So what was your biggest surprise getting into this business? Since you didn't grow up in the wine business and then you started as a young man, what was the biggest surprise over time that you found by being in this business?
There have been many surprises, but the most difficult was the start, because nobody knowed me, knowed us, and my decision was to make different wines, more complex wines in barrels. We started with the, if I can say, the French style wines like the Burgundies making, but with local varieties. And we started or tried to sell them on the best restaurants in Slovenia first. And honestly, I have been quite successful on the beginning, and from that point, everything was easier.
Yeah. What do you think wine brings to people's lives? Like, why do so many people enjoy wine? What does it do for them?
For me, it's like a life. It's a lifestyle. I live always with the wine, even when I don't work. So always when travel, we live with wine. So I hope the wine sends a message, like also to the others, like it's to me. So it's a part of life, a part of fun, a part of pleasure, and a part of satisfaction.
A lot of people don't know about Cullio Brda as a winemaking region. What would you like them to know about it?
I would like to know that it's a historic wine region where the grapes are grown since many centuries, and very in a natural way. So we didn't have any, how can I say, modern technologies in the past, and just the last decades are knowing a little bit Slovenia, Cullio, maybe some decades before, but it's not easy because we are a small region, and we had to be recognized through local varieties like Rebula, Tokaj, and Malvasia. But the main, obviously, is Rebula, and I hope also in the future that the trend of Rebula will grow.
Yeah. Now you're going to be expanding. You're putting in like a new area and a new tasting room. So what's your vision for your winery?
We are very focused always on quality. We don't want to grow too much. We would like to grow on quality and on the recognition in many markets, especially in the most important ones.
So you have two sons, young boys. Are they interested in the wine business? Do you want to see them get into this business?
Yeah, sure. We'd like me and my wife work in this business, especially for them. And they are now pretty young. They are 7 and almost 10, but they're pretty different between them. And the small is very strong and has really looks hardworking a little bit, and the biggest one is more technical, and it could have really sensitive for tastings. And
so together, maybe they'll complete each other for a good future.
Yeah, hopefully. We don't know what may happen in the future, but we hope so.
That's great. Well, Mateusz, thank you very much for inviting us to your winery and for telling us your story.
Yeah, thank you also to you to coming here.